Hi all, I thought I'd do a quick tutorial on enharmonically spelling intervals because I seem to get a lot of questions from students who seem to be getting a little bit confused with exactly um, how to find out what to call a written interval. It should be noted that this is really only for solving or understanding written intervals. This doesn't really go into orally recognizing intervals. That's for another day, perhaps. So I've created this sort of PowerPoint presentation, and I thought I would take you guys through it and hopefully um, help people better understand um, how to name intervals correctly and enharmonically correct. So here we go. Intervals. How to understand why intervals are called what they are and how to correctly enharmonically spell them. So we may as well, before we start talking about how to spell, when you identify an interval, it's often called spelling, the enharmonic spelling of an interval. It's really important. So an interval is the distance between two notes. It's often measured in semitones, semitones being the smallest distance between any two notes in Western music. Other cultures use different intervals, which are often much smaller than the semitone. Of course, if you only have one note, we don't have an interval because we need two things to see what the distance between them are. An interval can range from a perfect unison. Now, I'm not contradicting myself here. Perfect unison could be two separate instruments playing the same pitch. That would be called a perfect unison. It's 0 semitones apart. All the way up to a perfect octave, which is 12 semitones. We can have larger intervals than a perfect octave. They're called compound intervals, but for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm not going to go into those. I'm just going to stick with the intervals between a perfect unison and a perfect octave, or 0 semitones and 12 semitones. So most students, when they come to me, they're quite happy and comfortable with the idea of, putting a sharp or a flat or a natural on the top note to change the tonality of the interval. But they often forget that you can actually do the same thing from with the bottom note to raise and lower the bottom note in relation to the top note and be increasing and decreasing the distance between the two notes. So it's important to remember that. Moving both the top and bottom notes up and down by the same amount does not change the distance between the two notes. So you can see here we've got a middle C and a C an octave above. If I was to put a sharp accidental in front of both of those, I have not changed the interval because I'm simply moving both notes up by a semitone. If I was to put two flats on the C, middle C and the C above it, I'm, again, moving both notes down by the same distance, thus not changing the distance between the notes. I'm changing the pitches, but the distance remains the same. I often like to use the analogy of, if you're looking at a room and you want to increase, if you want to make, high ceilings in this particular room, you've got two options. You can either raise the roof to get that added height, or you can actually lower the floor to get the same effect. If you're to do both, you're actually really increasing the height of the ceiling. And similar thing in terms of intervals and the relationship between the top and the bottom note. So just keep that in mind as we keep going. So great, but how does that really help? In order to do this method, which I advise students to use, you'll need a few things. You'll need an understanding of what a scale degree is. Now, when we talk about scale degrees, let's just go back to the previous slide. If you were to visualize this note middle C on a keyboard, for example, this would be scale degree 1. The D would be scale degree 2, E would be scale degree 3, F 4, G 5, A 6, B 7, and C 8, or back to 1. So that is what a scale degree is. It is not the same thing as a semitone. Think of it as the stepping stones of a scale. That's what a scale degree is, and a semitone is the distance between each of those stepping stones. Here's a table which we have the standard intervals, which most of you should be relatively familiar with, and if you're not, here's a good chance to learn them. We have two basic types of intervals. Intervals which are classified as perfect intervals, that is perfect unison, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, and perfect octave. They're called perfect not because they are perfect, it's because they don't have a major or minor tonality. That's probably the simplest way to explain it. And then the other types of intervals can be major or minor, depending on how many semitones. So you've got a minor and major second, a minor and major third, a minor and major sixth, and a minor and major seven. It's probably worth me just mentioning that lowercase m represents minor, capital M represents major in this case. So we know what a scale degree is, we know what a semitone is, and we are familiar with this table, or at least are able to refer to it in the following steps. Now, one interval that I haven't talked about is the tritone, sometimes called the devil's interval. It can be classified as an augmented fourth or a diminished fifth, and that is 6 semitones, exactly halfway between a perfect unison and a perfect octave. We're going to talk about the tritone a little later. So, the two-step method, maybe a little bit more than 2 steps, but there's 2 basic steps which have a few little things to remember. Here's an example of how you might go about finding out what this interval is. So step 1, count the scale degrees. Remember, the scale degrees are the notes of the scale, not the semitones. So we have scale degree 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So there is between the first and the 6th scale degree, we call this type of interval a sixth. Now, what quality it is depends on how many semitones. If you remember back to the table of standard intervals, we have a minor sixth and a major sixth. The minor sixth is 8 semitones and the major sixth is 9 semitones. But for now, we're just counting the scale degrees. So if it's between a 1 and a 6, that's the interval, we're going to call it a something sixth. So just write underscore 6 or dash 6, because we're going to fill in the tonality in a little bit when we've counted semitones. Now down here on the bottom, we've got that written interval with the red dots indicating our starting and our ending scale degree. And we're going to count the semitones. Remembering, a semitone is the distance between 2 notes. So we do not count D as a semitone because we haven't gone anywhere yet. Remember, stepping stones and moving between stepping stones. So let's count the semitones. We have D, 2, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 semitones from D to B. Yeah, so there's 9 semitones. So then we refer back to our table. We go, okay, we know it's a something sixth, so we're expecting it to be either 8 or 9 semitones. Okay, and we counted 9 semitones, so what the answer is, it's a major sixth. Okay, and this way, a lot of people have been taught a way to look at the lower note and then think of the major scale, and if it's in the major scale, it's going to be a perfect or a major interval. If it's not there, there's probably a minor or something. I find that can get a little bit confusing in some circumstances, or in fact if you're asked to write a specific interval below a given note. So this way it doesn't really matter. You can you can do this with any note, really simply. So the answer, of course, is a major sixth. Let's take a look at another example. So here we have an F and an A flat. Okay, so same method. Step one, count the scale degrees. So here we go. We have 1, 2, 3. So of course, remember we write it's a something third. We don't know what type of third it is yet, but we're going to count the semitones in order to try and find out. Okay, so again, down below we have our keyboard, and we started on F to A flat. So let's count. 1, 2, 3 semitones to A flat. So we have counted 3 semitones between F and A flat. So again, we refer to our table and say, okay, we counted, it's a something third, so it's got to be, I'm expecting it to be one of these two. A minor third, which is 3 semitones, and a major third, which is 4 semitones. Remember, we counted 3 semitones, so it's going to be a minor third. That's what that interval is called. Sounds pretty straightforward. Let's try another example. So we go about this exactly the same way. So we start, remember, by counting the scale degrees first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's a something sixth. Great. Now let's count the semitones. Now it's worth noting that the notes here are D to B sharp. Now many students say, but B sharp doesn't exist, it's just C. We have to remember that although they are the same pitch, technically, especially on a piano which has a fixed tuning, B sharp and C are not the same thing, because otherwise they would have the same name. If a vocalist or a violinist or anyone playing on an instrument with a flexible tuning will play a B sharp slightly differently to a C, depending on the context. So, but in this diagram, we write B sharp is the same key on a keyboard as C, but it is a different enharmonic note. It is what's called an enharmonic equivalent. It's the same key on a keyboard, but it's got a different name. Okay, so we're up to counting the semitones. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 semitones between D and B sharp. What's the next step? Refer to your table. Again, we counted a something sixth. Okay, so we're expecting 8 or 9 semitones. But remember, we counted 10 semitones. And so that would mean that it's a minor 7, right? No, because remember, it's a something sixth. Yeah, and this is where some students start to get caught. If they only count the semitones, you would have written this interval as a minor 7th. But it's not a minor 7th because it's a something sixth. It's between the 1st degree to the 6th degree of the scale. Yes, it's an altered 6th degree. It's been raised with a sharp sign, but it is still a something sixth. Okay, so how do we say it's a something sixth, which is 10 semitones? Well, we need to start talking about augmented and diminished intervals. Okay, this might seem a little scary and confusing, but I think it's quite straightforward. Let me explain it to you. So on the left-hand side, we have our major and minor intervals. Remember, major second, major minor third, major minor sixth, major minor 7. On the left-hand side, we have our perfect intervals, perfect unison, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, and perfect octave. And above, we have augmented intervals, which can be anything: unison, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and 7th, and octave. And we can, on the bottom, we have diminished intervals: unison, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7th, and octave. And each time you move up or down one of the orange arrows, we are adding or subtracting a semitone. So augmented is the largest interval, diminished is the smallest interval. And what size of interval, i.e. second, fourth, fifth, seventh, will depend on whether you go to the left-hand side or the right-hand side of this diamond shape. So let's have a look at some examples. Here we have the example from the first slide. What do? We count the we count the scale degrees first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's a something sixth. We count the semitones. Let me just save you the pain. It's 9 semitones. So 9 semitones, which is a sixth, is a major sixth, highlighted in orange. Okay? If we were to lower the top note, or if we go back to our room analogy, lower the roof, we have decreased the distance between those two notes. Okay? So we're moving down here to a minor sixth. It is still 6 scale degrees, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but this time it's 8 semitones rather than 9. Okay? And if we were to then take our minor sixth and then lower the roof again, it's still 6 scale degrees above the bottom note. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah? It's a B double flat, which some of you might be saying, but it's an A. It's the same note as A, but it's not because it's written as a B double flat. Okay? So it's a sixth, but this time it's got only 7 semitones. So coming down here, we might say, oh, 7 semitones, perfect fifth. But remember, we've already written it to something sixth. So we were at a minor sixth. It's 1 semitone smaller. So therefore, it becomes a diminished sixth, right? So what happens if we're getting larger or increasing the distance between the notes? Again, go back to our major sixth example here. 6 scale degrees, 9 semitones. If we increase that by raising the roof, increasing the distance between the two notes, it becomes an augmented sixth. Yeah, so it was 9 semitones, it's now 10 semitones. So down here, 10 semitones is one semitone further apart than what we're expecting a major sixth to be. So therefore, it's an augmented sixth. Okay? Let's have a look at another couple. I'll speed up a little bit as I go through. But remember, with our analogy, we can raise and lower the roof to increase the distance between the floor and the ceiling, but we can also raise and lower the floor, theoretically, although it's a little bit trickier in real life. So let's again start with our major third here. The interval name that it is highlighted in orange or written in orange, just so you can follow along. We have, remember the two-step process, we count scale degrees. So 1, 2, 3 between F and A. So that's a something third. And how many semitones between F and A? So we have F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. 4 semitones. Down here, 4 semitones is a major third. Great. If we were to lower the floor, we're increasing the distance between the two notes. So we are moving this way up to an augmented third. Okay? If we go back to our major third, our starting interval, and we raise the floor by putting a sharp on the F, it becomes a minor third. And we put, then from there we put a double sharp. So that raises F by 2 semitones. So if you were to play it on the piano, you would be playing F double sharp, which is the same key as G, to A, right? So how many semitones between F double sharp and A? So F double sharp, G sharp, A. There's only 2 semitones. So we're expecting a minor third to be 3 semitones. This is one smaller. So it's a diminished third. Okay? So that's great. We've covered the left-hand side of the diamond. What about the right-hand side? Well, it works exactly the same way, except that moving from the perfect intervals, we move straight up to the augmented or straight down to the diminished. Yeah? Again, let's go over it really quick. This interval here, middle C to G, count the scale degrees first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 scale degrees. It's a something fifth. How many semitones between C and G? We have 7 semitones. If we go down to our table, 7 semitones is a perfect fifth. Highlighted there. Excellent. Now again, the room analogy with the roof, we raise the roof, it becomes an augmented fifth. We put a sharp in front of the G, so C to G sharp is an augmented fifth, and C to G flat, we've lowered the roof from the perfect, it's a diminished fifth. Again, showing you raising the floor as well. So we have a perfect fifth in the middle here, and by lowering the floor, C flat to G, we've increased the distance between the two notes. It's an augmented fifth. Okay, going the other way, so we start back at our perfect fifth, 5 scale degrees, 7 semitones. We've raised the floor, it becomes a diminished fifth. So I hope that's cleared up a few things. I would really recommend you just pick a few notes. They don't have to be vertical notes. You can just pick a melody line of music notation and just look at intervals between two notes that are played one after the other, or just pick any notes at random and try the two-step process. Remember, count the scale degrees first and then count the semitones. And don't forget to write, how many scale degrees, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Write something 5. It'll just stop you from, in the panic of an exam, counting only the semitones and then writing the wrong answer. So with writing down the scale degrees, it just kind of hopefully makes you stop and go, oh, hang on, that's not quite right. So that's the whole aim of doing that in that specific process, in that specific order. So I hope you found this this video helpful, and hopefully you're still with me. More videos to come, I think.